Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 242. Today I sit down with contributing editor Chris Gochnour. I don't think it's his first time on the show, but it's been quite a while. And we discuss all things hand tools, spoke shaves, blade angles, back bevels, all sorts of intricacies and subtleties of hand tool woodworking. And it's really interesting to me. I mentioned it in the show, but Chris is a lover of all things hand tools, and he deeply respects tradition. But that tradition isn't necessarily going to dictate how he uses hand tools. So Chris always has a very interesting take on hand tool usage. Before we get started, I want to let everyone know that we have a really fun webinar coming up with the folks over at PanaRouter. It's going to be June 17th, so a little bit less than 2 weeks after this episode is released. And they're going to demonstrate how to make all sorts of joints with the PanaRouter. Mortise and tenons, box joints, dovetails. We might even play a game of, mortise and tenon requests, where you, the audience, tells Mac what size joint to make. I don't know. We were just spitballing the other day, and it sounded like something fun. Also, I want to note that they're going to be giving out live at the webinar a discount code for anyone interested in a PanaRouter. So head on over to finewoodworking.com/webinars. Sign up for that webinar. If you can't make it live on June 17th, it will be recorded and posted to the website the next day. All right, so enough about that. On with the show after a brief word from our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Maverick Abrasives. Maverick is a family-run company that's been making sanding belts and discs for woodworkers in the USA for 30 years. With Maverick, you're buying factory direct, so you're likely to save a lot of money. I just looked around my shop at the various abrasives that I use, and I did the math. If I bought everything directly from Maverick, I would save around 40% on my sanding discs and belts. Maverick has all of the popular size belts and discs in stock on their website, but they can also make any custom sizes that you might need. Check out their website at maverickabrasives.com or give one of their owners, Garrett, a call at 714-646-3299 and use the code FINEWOODWORKING. That's one word, FINEWOODWORKING, for 10% off your order. Again, that's maverickabrasives.com and the code is FINEWOODWORKING. So, Chris, you just finished up your semester?
Yeah, week or two ago.
So Now, the world might not know that you teach at, is it Salt Lake Community?
Yeah, Salt Lake Community College. Do two classes out there, woodwork and millwork and furniture design and construction.
Okay, so your millwork, you're teaching, like, this is a like go out and get a job kind of thing.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
In all honesty, for the students to be able to enter the workforce. A lot of them are there just because they want it as a hobby. Mm-hmm. But I've had, many students over the years that went through the program and were able to, get into employment and doing really well.
How long have you been doing that?
Oh, I've been out there for 20 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 20 plus years.
So that's way of life. I mean, this is a big part of your life.
Yeah, and it's a lot of time. The day class goes Monday and Wednesday from 8:30 to 1:30, and the evening class is Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 10. So it bites into my life, my personal shop time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, thankfully you're off now, right? For a little while.
Oh yeah.
Are you in the shop building? Are you planning on going to teach or?
Well, so as I was at school, I was doing a commission, doing a mid-century modern desk, kind of in a Hans Wegner inspired design. Mm-hmm. So that kept me really busy, working through the details on that desk. And then once school ended, I go back to Mark Adams in a few weeks to do 10 days back there. And I've got kind of a challenging project we're going to be doing this year. And so I'm having to work out all the details and bugs and get things boxed up and shipped. And so
What are you doing? What's the project?
It's actually an end table. But again, it's in the mid-century style. It's really quite an interesting table. It has splayed legs that go into a batten. The top is able to float unrestricted by the dovetailed batten. It has a drawer that also rides on the battens. It has a shelf below that kind of wraps around the turned legs, not completely, but kind of like a half moon wrap around the legs, and has a little reveal separating the shelf from the legs. Kind of a neat piece, but it's got plenty of challenges, curves and angles. And
Yeah, it sounds like there's a little bit of everything going on there.
Yeah, it's a real fascinating build, to be honest with you, the way it's put together. But it's not just a box.
Yeah. Is this, so a lot of people know you as like, and it's probably our fault, but a lot of people know you as a hand tool guy.
Right.
And I remember walking in your shop to shoot that hand tool video, and I mean, the vast majority of your shop is taken up with machinery.
Yeah.
You are an all-around woodworker.
Yeah. I mean, it's because I'm going on over 35 years, and most of that time was spent doing commissioned furniture. And so that you just have to be really efficient and be able to knock it out. And so machines were integral to the success of that. But of course, the hand tools lend themselves very well to custom work where you might have on a machine setup where if you have hand tool proficiencies, then you just do it that way. So the blend was vital and continues to be.
Yeah. So your class at Mark Adams, is it a hand tool class or?
No.
Okay.
Well, I'm doing a weekend class where we're focusing on hand cut dovetails and hand cut mortise and tenons.
Okay.
A 2-day class, but the week-long class will be a lot of machinery. However, the drawer will be dovetailed. And one thing nice about that is the drawer is handwork, and they're independent on their own bench doing that. Where the table requires a lot of machine setups. And when you have multiple people, you sometimes have to wait for access to this setup. And so having that drawer available, if there's little, lag time before you can access the equipment, you've got other stuff that can keep you busy. So I've done the workshop once before, and it really works out well to have an aspect of completely handwork that they can just be self-guided on their own. So we'll see how it goes.
So this is your first time teaching this class, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did it once at my shop with 4 students. They were brothers and cousins that come over every now and again, and it worked out actually really well.
Good.
So, but first time shipping everything back to Indiana and that kind of thing. So
yeah, that's not, I know Mike struggles with that, trying to get tools to and from, and you can't just drive. Are you flying?
I did drive last year, which I've done it twice. I've been teaching there over 20 years, and I did it the first year, which was 20 years ago. And I did it last year due to the pandemic and inability to fly and all that kind of thing. But that's a 5-day drive round trip, 2.5 each way. And so that's hard to do. Yeah. I fly, but it means that just lots of boxes and shipping and crossing your fingers that it doesn't get lost. So
yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, should we answer some questions?
Sure.
We have, so back to the hand tool thing. We have, the listeners know that I have folders with, there'll be a Chris Gochnour folder, a Tim Rousseau folder, Tim Coleman folder. And as questions come in, I throw them in a folder of like, oh, I'd really like to hear so-and-so's take on that. I'd like to hear Chris's take on that.
Sure.
And we had talked about doing this a while ago, and it just never happened. But in the meantime, it turned out I had about like 15 questions stuffed in your folder. And normally I try and make these happen around 5. So I apologize to everyone for that, but we decided to focus on, these are mostly hand tool questions today for you. We have a lot of other questions, some workbench related questions, which I think you would have an interesting perspective on, and we'll do those another time. And then we'll just have you on just all around another time as well.
Sounds great.
But let's start throwing some hand tool questions at you.
Okay.
This first question is a spokeshave question from Tom. I am working on the chair described by Matthew Teague's Build an Elegant Dining Chair video series. I've been working on the backsplat and the crest rail, cleaning them up after I bandsaw the rough shape with my Veritas large spoke shave. The issue I'm having is chatter and the difficulty of pushing the spoke shave. When there is no chatter, I can make a clean stroke. The results are great. The wood is cherry, extremely smooth to the touch after it's cut by the spoke shave. But after I get chatter, frequently it requires more strokes to clean it up. I have made mountains of shavings as I'm building 10 chairs, and I keep the blade sharp. I have inserted both the shims behind the blade that were supplied with the shave. The shavings are about 4/1000ths of an inch or thinner. I'm frequently stopped cold mid-stroke and have pushed so hard on the shave that I'm worried I will break it. I've tried to ease up on the pressure in my push, and that does not cut at all. But even then, the shave will dig in mid-stroke and stop cold. Do you have any suggestions? This is complicated.
And unusual.
Okay, all right.
Unusual. To me, a spoke shave is a very simple tool, you know, and they're, for the most part, shouldn't be, I mean, let's say this, I understand the chatter. It's got that little soul. Chatter is not uncommon, but you can typically get away without it. I mean, oftentimes if I'm doing a curve, you work downhill, start high and work towards the low spot. And once you get into the bottom, oftentimes you get a little torn grain, or, chatter is just, it doesn't typically bother me too much. Sometimes if it is the way it is, I'll just grab a nice sharp card scraper and just remove the chatter with that, and then do a little sanding. And but for the most part, chatter is not a problem in my experience with the spoke shaves, although I understand it. What does seem odd there is the amount of energy that's being required for him to propel the shave. Now, he mentions the large spoke shave, okay, which I don't have and I've never used. However, I know that it has a blade that is 2 5/8 wide. That's the width of a jointer plane blade. Huh. And so obviously a jointer plane is a huge tool and has a lot of heft and mass behind it so I would suspect a little bit of the challenge is just the size of the shave. It's just a bigger tool. But things to consider from what he said there. I'm going to say this is going to be crazy to say, but that blade can go in either way, bevel up or bevel down. Okay, so the first thing that comes to my mind is check the blade, and the bevel should be down. Okay, like a bench plane. I once got a steal on a spoke shave at a tool sale because the guy vowed it didn't work. It was not a good tool, and I knew it was a good tool, so I bought it. When I got home, I sharpened the blade up, put it in correctly. And it's great. Yeah, I know that that's a common problem with spoke shaves, is that they get the blade in upside down. And so the bed of the shave is possibly like a bench plane, 45 degrees. You put the bevel up and you're cutting with a scraper, not a spoke shave.
Oh, because you've got 45 degrees plus 25 or
or
whatever.
30 or
Yeah.
35.
Oh, wow.
And if that's the case, it is going to chatter. It's going to take a ton of energy. So I'm not saying that's the case, but I would just say that there's a chance, check that out. Okay.
Yeah.
But we'll assume that that's not the case. The shims.
The shims totally confounded me. And I didn't realize until you had mentioned it. Veritas, he says right in there, Veritas large spoke shave. And so what are these shims meant to do?
Well, they even come on their regular spoke shaves.
They do. Okay.
But they're actually to tighten the mouth. It's not an adjustable mouth. And so you put shims, these little plastic shims behind the blade, between the frog and the blade, and it narrows the mouth opening.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I think the mouth opening is awfully narrow. And when I tried to put the shims at one point, and I don't think I could even get a shaving through it. So I've never used the shims. But understanding narrowing the mouth, that could potentially create resistance, because especially a shaving as big as 4/1000, that's a piece of paper. Trying to get it through a narrow mouth is going to create resistance.
Okay.
And so maybe the first thing I would try is remove the shims. I don't think they're going to be a real need. Cherry's an easy enough wood to work. I don't think tear out is going to be a huge issue. And so I would probably remove the shims. One other thing, when I set up any tool, whether it's a plane, a spoke shave, he says the blade is sharp, so that's good. It's got to be sharp. But when I set out to use it, I don't cut at all. I have the blade all the way into the tool to where it's not cutting at all. And then I'll advance it to a very light cut. And I'll use it. And that would be interesting right there to verify whether it chatters at the lightest cut, maybe a 1,000th shaving or something. If it's cutting really nicely and it's not chattering, well, that says something. Well, now advance a little bit to where it's more efficient. It's removing more material, and make the assessment. Is it still cutting smoothly? And then once you get to a point where it's a pretty heavy shaving, if all of a sudden the chatter isn't introduced at that point, it really indicates that you're asking too much of the tool. You're asking it to do more than it's really capable of doing. So I find that the depth of cut in the blade is just vital to the performance of a spoke shave. It's got to be right. Mm-hmm. Another thing, is the grip. The grip. Now, I don't use the large spoke shave, but I know it's big. Let me talk about, first of all, the smaller Veritas shave, just their standard spoke shave. Mm-hmm. Well, the way that I hold that is not like I'm holding a bicycle handlebar where I just wrap my hands around the handles. I take my index finger and I put them just on the casting to the side of the blade. And then I abut my thumbs behind the back of the shave. And I really get the control of the shave from my index finger and thumbs. That's where all the control comes from. I lightly wrap the other 3 fingers of each hand around the handles, but it's not like they're grasping really firmly. They're just sort of holding it in my hands, but all of the control comes from the index fingers and thumbs. Mm-hmm. And I notice at times students will hold it like the handlebar and it'll chatter. It's really prone to chatter. I think that may become a little bit of an issue on that big spoke shave, because it's just designed to have your handles out, or your hands out there on the handles, not close in. But it may be something he could try. Bring those hands in. Another thing is skew the shave. Mm-hmm. Sounds like he's kind of working a broader area and contours. Skew it rather than head on. And you can actually lower the cutting angle by using a shearing cut. I think that, yeah, I think that would be,
So yeah, he's got a really wide blade.
yeah, yeah.
And when all of that iron digs into a piece of wood, the whole body of a spoke shave has a tendency of twisting on you,
Yeah,
right?
because it's got such a small soul.
And digging in even further, right?
Yeah, yeah.
My spoke shave experience is limited to curved bottom spoke shaves.
Oh, okay.
I've
Well,
got
they're hard. They're challenging.
you kind of got, yeah. And when I really cut my teeth with a spoke shave, I was taking a Boggs chair class with David Diard, and I kept wanting to reach for the flat bottom because I was getting chatter, and he was like, "No, you got to work through this."
Yeah,
and it was like, if you can drive this shave, you can drive anything. Then
it is true. The round bottom pivots, rolls forward and rolls back, and engaging the iron consistently is tricky.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a challenge, but as you learned, you get a feel for it.
Yeah, and I wind up like putting my thumbs, right almost over the iron,
right
and
behind it,
just to get that body locked into my hands.
Yeah, yeah.
And I could see if you're holding a spoke shave
out there,
it's just going to twist in the wind. Yeah,
yeah. So again, never having used it, it's a little tricky for me to assess what's going on. But I think those things I mentioned are problems that I've seen associated with the shave. I think the depth of cut, provided the iron is in correctly, the depth of cut would be key. And if it's just minimal chatter, live with it and use the shave, because it's much more efficient at removing material than a scraper or something like that, even a rasp. And whatever imperfections you're left with, deal with them at the end with a scraper or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I had one thought. If you're building 10 of anything,
yeah,
is this the place for a spoke shave, or is this the place for? I mean, if Tom is a hand tool user, but would you make a jig?
Well, I think I'm not absolutely familiar with the situation he's talking about, but it sounds like he's blending things in, say from the crest rail to the legs or arms. And therefore you've got complex curves. It's just not and so I honestly think the spoke shave is ideal for blending one plane into another plane. The shave is just, and in other words, I don't know that you can actually produce those cuts on a machine. You could produce the one curve and the other curve, and then the blending of the two in. I think a spoke shave would be the ideal tool for that. And I sense maybe that's what why he's using it.
You really enjoy using a spoke shave, don't you?
Yeah. I use a shave a bunch, and they've always served me well. I don't shy away from it at all. Yeah.
I think I remember your face lighting up when you got to, Coping saw something out and then was like, all right, now we get to really have fun,
They're neat.
Okay. So this next question it seems simple. It's from Chris, and we were just talking about card scrapers. Chris asks, how do you recommend storing and protecting your sharpened card scrapers? Currently, mine are laid out in a single layer on a windowsill because I'm not sure what else to do with them. It seems like a wooden block would be great, but I'm not sure how to create the right curves to stash them. Do you bandsaw and go in from either side, alternating rows? What do you do? So the alternating rows thing, going in from either side, confused me a little bit. But
I think I'm confused on that too. And unless maybe that stands vertically and you put them in from either side to get a deeper cut, maybe it's kind of standing vertical and they can come in from either side. What I do sounds like what he's alluding to. However, mine is only from one side,
Okay.
and it's actually in my wall-mounted tool cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
It is positioned between two fixed shelves, and it's on the side of the cabinet, kind of centered on the side. And it's basically a piece of wood that is 1.5 inches thick, 2.5 inches wide, and the distance from the one shelf to the next. It spans the distance of those shelves. I just cut kerfs into it on the table saw, essentially cross-cutting, and I slope the kerfs maybe 10 degrees upward. So when the shade goes in, it stays in there. It's not inclined to, come out.
Mm-hmm.
And because it is inclined, held in there on an incline, the kerf doesn't need to be tight. So I just used a thin kerf table saw blade. And again, I probably cut them about 1 inch deep. The stock being 1.5 inches, it leaves a 1/2 inch to kind of integrate, keep all the other, all of the layers together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just screw that, I leave a space at the top and at the bottom and just screw it to the side of the cabinet. And it's super. I put card scrapers in there, sometimes spokeshave blades, small little profiled scraper blades, just everything.
How many card scrapers do you keep on hand?
Well, I've got a bunch, but I don't use a bunch all the time. I mean, in all honesty, I have a few, maybe 3 of my just standard scrapers, but they're set up all the same. And then I have contoured scrapers that I use sometimes on a chair seat or who knows what. I have some scrapers that have real tight curves for maybe removing facets from a chair spindle or something like that. So all sorts of unusual, odd scrapers, but they don't get used often. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I probably have 10 slots in that, and they're all filled with, also cabinet scraper, the number 80 Stanley cabinet scraper. I've got a couple spare blades for that.
A cabinet scraper is held in a body, almost like a spokeshave.
It's
right?
kind of like a spokeshave. Yeah.
And it's a very, very thick blade.
Well, I guess it depends on maybe the model, you know, but the old, I'm going to call it the Stanley number 80 was their, just a extremely common tool, sold in masses because I think they worked well. They really did work well. And that blade is not that thick.
Okay.
It has a little thumb screw behind the blade that you turn and you can arc it. You can create a little bit of a flex. And they work exceptionally well.
Okay, so it isn't as thick as what you'd find in a scraper plane or something.
No, I don't know how thick. Maybe a 1/16 of an inch thick, or reasonably flexible.
Okay. And what do you use? I know you dabble in flea markets and junk stores and that whole world. Do you cut up saw plates for your scrapers or?
Oh, no. I mean, I that works for sure. That works. Boy, I swear by the old Sandvik, or the Bajo, which were made in Sweden. I now notice they have shifted manufacturing to Portugal. And I hope that they're the same because honestly, the steel in those scrapers is to me just amazing. Just smooth and almost buttery when you file out of it. I've filed a bunch of other brands, and well, I'll say there's other good ones too. This is not just, but sometimes scrapers seem really hard and harsh, and when you file them, it's just this scratchy, groveling cut. It's funny. When I do hand tool classes, we'll have a scraper that needs to be sharpened. And so I'll ask for a volunteer, and I've sort of quit doing that. I'm almost like, say, do I have a volunteer that has a Bajo scraper? Because I'll get some of these cheap, whatever. And to be honest, cheap, I mean, a good scraper is $10. So it's not like it's an expensive tool, but, and and boy, they don't file nicely. They don't burnish not nicely. And then after you're done, they don't really perform to what you would expect. So for some reason, I'm really sold on those Sandvik and what became Baco. I just like the steel.
I have two Bacos, and one I rounded the corners off on, and I don't remember why. And I found myself being bothered by that because I keep it in my apron, and I would grab it to get squeeze out, to get glue squeeze out of a corner. And I couldn't do it with the rounded corners. The other thing I love about them is the little plastic holder that comes with them. It just keeps it nice and protected, and it's just that's worth the price of admission.
They were, I hope that, like I say, with them coming from a different location, that they're every bit as good as they have been through the years.
I wonder if any of the listeners out there, if anyone has recently gotten one, leave a comment in show notes and let us know. Okay. The other thing about Bacos that I really like, anytime I use another even high quality brand, and I'm sure it's just because 98% of my scraper usage has been with a Baco, it's a good weight. There's like a good give to it and a flex, and sometimes they're thinner than I'm used to or something. It feels
well, and even
different.
Even Baco made them available in different gauge.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they had some real thin ones and some, but I can't even give a number on the thickness. It seems to me like it was a 80 something, and that's I think the one that's most common. The one you're probably used to using, that it's just right. It's stiff enough that you can really get behind it, but it's flexible enough that you don't have to just strain your fingers to flex it. So yeah.
All right, let's see. We have a question from Rich, and I'm going to pair this with a question from Max, and because you're the king of this one. From Rich, a local woodworking professional elucidated, the many virtues of a skew block plane, including that of fitting a tenon to a mortise. I purchased the plane, and after nearly a year of heavy use, I am extremely satisfied. Perhaps naively, I believe the skew block plane obviates the need for a shoulder plane. Have you used the skew block plane? And if so, do you believe that there's a functional limitation when contrasted with a shoulder plane? I am not looking for an excuse to purchase a tool I do not own. And then there's Max, who has another skew block plane question. I recently purchased my first block plane, the Lie-Nielsen Rabbet block plane, because I thought it would be a great multi-use tool, capable of trimming tenon shoulders and faces as well as doing all the tasks a normal block plane can handle. I purchased a shoulder plane soon after that, thinking it would be another great tool for the arsenal. I'm now interested in a regular 60.5 adjustable mouth block plane, particularly for its use as a Kumiko strip thicknesser. I am worried I may have impulsively purchased the wrong block plane. I assume with the Rabbet block plane. So my question is this. Is it good to have both a Rabbet block plane and a shoulder plane, and or both block planes? And does the Rabbet block plane do things the shoulder plane can't? So, I remember early in my years of woodworking, thumbing through the Lee Valley or the Lie-Nielsen catalog and seeing the Rabbet block plane or the skew Rabbet block plane and thinking, why would anyone not buy this? This seems like it does everything.
Right.
I've seen you wield a Rabbet plane. I've seen you wield a skew block plane. I've seen you wield a regular block plane. Are you just showing off your collection or?
No. So that's a tricky question. And I think who was the first? Was it
the
Rich?
First one is from Rich. Yes.
Oh, okay. Let's focus on that one first of all.
Sure.
Because his question is, can this skew block do everything?
Yeah.
Okay, and he's almost answered his own question there, because he says he's been using it for a year, and he's delighted with the tool. It's doing everything that he had hoped that it would do. So let's also we're looking at maybe just two different tools, even though there's four. There's the shoulder plane, there's the block plane, and then there's the Rabbet block plane or the skew block. Yeah. Which those latter, the block plane is the only one that's in a different family. The Rabbet, the shoulder, and the skew all cut into a corner. Okay.
The blade extends all the way over to the edge of the plane.
And so they can cut into a corner.
Yeah.
And in a sense, that's what distinguishes those from the block plane. Oh, okay. Is that they can work into a corner. Therefore, and I guess we should also say, if they can work into a corner, there's no reason they can't work on the surface of a board.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the one of those questions stated he wanted to use a block plane for gauging the thickness of Kumiko parts.
Yeah.
Well, none of those latter three will work because the blade goes to the edge, and so it can't rest on little runners to regulate the thickness.
Okay. So it would wind up cutting into the runner.
It would cut into the runner, and where the block plane has a cast iron to the side of the blade, which can register on the runners. Okay. And so that makes total sense why he may want a block plane if that's what he's going to use, because the rabbeting plane isn't going to do that. Okay. So let's just make it clear that for that application, but I believe Rich wasn't curious about that. He was more interested in just, does he need anything else? This skew block is doing, and to be honest, I would have to just say, I think, if it's working for you, don't look for a solution to a problem you don't have.
Okay.
The only thing I'll say about, say, a shoulder plane is it has a different form. It's tall. And so sometimes, say you're doing a longer tenon, and say you wanted to do the actual shoulder where you put it on its side. Sometimes the taller shoulder plane gives you more room for clearance from your fingers from the tenon.
Okay.
Okay. Where that low profile block plane can be a little trickier to get a hold of. But the other thing, I would say that his skew plane has going for it that the shoulder plane doesn't is the skew blade. That skew blade can be really nice. Even if you are working, say, the end grain shoulder, the skew just shears with, less resistance. If you're doing tenon cheeks, again, the nice thing about the skew is it's cutting on a shearing cut. And when it exits the far side of the tenon, it exits gradually because of the, and it's far less prone to like ripping off a piece of wood on the far side.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the skew is a real nice aspect to working into a corner.
So why not get a skew other than for Kumiko sizing?
Right.
Or for runners, for using on runners. Why not just get a skew?
Yeah. And again, I don't know that I can answer that.
Okay.
Well, okay. Actually, maybe I've got one possible scenario.
Okay.
The shoulder plane is a right and left-handed tool because the blade comes to either side, and so you can work right-handed, or you can turn it around and you can work left-handed.
Okay.
The skew planes, and let's also, because I think there's a plane thrown in there that is not skew. And it's the Rabbet block plane.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
Which is like the shoulder plane in the sense that it's a right and left-handed plane.
Okay.
Okay, the blade projects either side. But that might be one of the advantages of the shoulder plane, the taller profile, easier to grasp, and that you can cut left and right-handed. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now let me touch on a solution to that. So oftentimes these skew block planes come in a left and right-handed version. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like, well, I'll be darned. Do I need to buy two planes?
That was going to be my follow-up. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And the answer is no, you don't. Buy the skew to the hand that you work. Right-handed. I'm right-handed, so I've got the right-handed skew.
Okay.
So that particular plane can actually cut rabbets. It has a fence. You can even put a dip stop on it, and you can use it to cut a regulated rabbet.
So the right-handed skew plane is open to the right side.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And therefore you can cut a rabbet. You've got a fence that will regulate the width of it. You can even put a depth stop that can regulate the depth, and it's just a Philister plane. Mm-hmm. But if you go to use it to trim a tenon, well, a lot of people hold the tenon flat on a workbench. Uh-huh. And the cut is to the right side, but in this scenario, the shoulder's to the left. And so what you have to do is turn the plane around and pull it towards you. Okay. You with me there? Mm-hmm. Which is, yep. It's, in all honesty, a bit awkward. It's not natural. It's an unusual cut. And that's why I think a lot of people have said, well, I need both. I need the left to where I'm trimming tenons. It's cutting to the left as I'm working the stock with my right hand. The solution to that is to take your tenon and hold it vertical on your workbench in a vise. And now the right-handed plane cuts with its right side against the shoulder. And interestingly enough, that's the best way to trim a tenon anyways, because if you've done it by hand, you've scribed the layout lines into it. Uh-huh. Okay. And if you have it flat on the bench, you can't see those lines because you have to put your head way down low and be looking at them. But when it's upright like this, you can see the lines all the way around it. And of course, you can only work the right side of that tenon, but then just turn it around and work the left side as it's oriented correctly. And in all honesty, that is the best way to trim a tenon, to fit a tenon. And I have to say right there, my preferred plane for that task is the Veritas skew block plane. It just works so well. It's got a wide blade, much more so than, say, the shoulder planes. And so it spans more area. Mm-hmm. It has the skew, so it exits cleanly. And if it's a 3-inch long tenon, it just covers a lot of territory. Mm-hmm. So
your use of the skew block plane when fitting tenons was the first time that I saw not only a skew block plane, other than just seeing it and thinking it was a one size fits all notion, but the way I saw you use that and a tail vise, I was like, I need both of those things. Like now I see why the tail vise is integral to what you do. And the skew block plane is just for fitting tenons. Watching you do that, it made entire sense to me. And if I build a bench, I will include a tail vise of some sort. It might be just an end vise on the end of the bench or something. Sure. But to hold a piece upright like that. Yeah.
So I'm not sure we've clarified anything.
But we've covered a lot of territory.
But I'm going to say one thing. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to actually say if I could buy one plane, and then if I could buy a second, and I'm going to give the order in which I would purchase.
Okay. Yeah.
The first would be a block plane. Just a standard block plane. There was recently a great article in Fine Woodworking on all the, not all, but a handful of applications where they excel.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have to echo that. They're very useful tools for trimming, fitting, profiling. So a basic low angle block plane would be, in my estimation, when you're setting up shop, the first of this family, not necessarily the first plane, but of this family that you might get. Second, I would go for the shoulder plane. Okay.
So we just spent like all of this time talking about how wonderful the skew is.
Well,
yeah. So shoulder plane. Why?
Well, so let's say a few things about that. And I would also go with a large one. I like the large shoulder plane because it will do what the skew does. It's a left and a right-handed. It will fit tenon cheeks, and it can trim the shoulder of a tenon. So it will do what the skew does. In some ways, I think the skew does it better, but it will certainly do all that stuff. I like the high profile. And I just find that I use it I've got both of them. And I would say possibly the shoulder plane is actually used a little bit more in just general shop tasks, not that they couldn't be done with, say, the skew, but I just am drawn to the shoulder plane.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's something that I'm going to throw out too. You can use, so if you had a 4-inch long tenon, mm-hmm. and say a medium shoulder plane, it only cuts 3/4 wide. Mm-hmm. Well, what you do there is you take a pass at the shoulder with the shoulder plane. Say we're fitting the cheek here, okay? Mm-hmm. Then you grab your block plane, and the block plane will do the rest of the tenon because it doesn't have to work into the corner.
Yeah.
You with me? I do that when I'm doing a big breadboard end, just like on a table end, which is a big, wide tenon. I'll use the shoulder plane to remove the material at the shoulder, and then just a block plane or even a bench plane to remove the rest of the material. And then as I need to get into that shoulder, so I use 2 planes to do, mm-hmm. So that's something not to completely rule out, that you're not limited to using the shoulder plane for the whole tenon. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then I suppose the third would be the skew Rabbet. That's a luxury, but it is a beautiful tool. And I should say that it could come in number 2, as Rick has found, that it's met every need that he's had.
In the past on this show, I think Mike and maybe Matt have argued against the skew because it's harder to sharpen. Is that something that you would factor in?
No.
Okay.
I don't think it's hard to sharpen.
Okay.
Now you're limited. You can't use the side clamping like the Eclipse, Okay. And then of course, if you have one of the Lie-Nielsen honing guides and one of their planes, you can use their jaws that will, hold that at the correct angle. What I use is the honing guide that is the top clamping, like the Veritas Mark I or mm-hmm. Mark II. I don't even use any special jigs for setting the angle or, the skew angle or the bevel angle. You put it in the guide and you kind of snug it into place with the locking knob. And you tilt the blade on the skew until it doesn't teeter. Mm-hmm. As soon as that blade rests flat, and there's no teeter between the wheel of the honing guide and the bevel of the blade, you've got the skew. And then it's just a function of getting the angle where you want it to be. And oftentimes I'll use a digital angle gauge. I'll just stick the magnet on the blade and set it at 25, 30 degrees. And I mean, I sharpen a skew blade as easily as I do a square blade.
Okay. Yeah. So don't let that be.
I don't. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe you've got to get that honing guide if you rely on a honing guide, but
Do you ever do you ever sharpen by hand, or not by hand, but freehand?
I don't, and I'll tell you why. My blade bevel angles are all over the place. I mean, I use a lot of bevel up planes, and I've got blades that have a 50-degree bevel for a real steep cutting angle, and I have some with a 20-degree bevel angle. And with a honing guide and an angle gauge, I can dial into that. I write on the blade the angle that I've honed it at, and just in a matter of seconds, I've got it in the honing guide. I've got it set at whatever weird angle that is, and I go to work. And I just
there was we did a video, and I think your bevel up smoother was like 40.2 or something.
well, and the reason that is those angles are never quite magic, and I think what happens is you sharpen a blade, the micro bevel gets bigger. Just the nature of removing material from the micro bevel, it gets bigger. So you have two options. Once it gets pretty big, is grind it back to small, or just increase the angle a little bit.
Okay, so that's why it just gets kicked up a little bit.
And that's why, it might be a 0.2 or 0.4 or something, because I'm trying to keep the angle as close to the original as I can, but I want to get more to the front of the iron. But I rely on honing guides, and I'm not ashamed.
No.
They're quick, and they serve me well.
There's a reason why Pony Jorgensen is tight with woodworkers. Their clamps are made using only the highest quality of materials, and they inspect each one to guarantee consistency and performance. That's what they mean when they say clamps without compromise. Head on over to ponyjorgensen.com to explore their wide range of pipe clamp fixtures, bar clamps, hand clamps, and more. And join their woodworking community on Instagram by following them at pony_Jorgensen. We have a question from Devin. Is it possible to put a back bevel on a bevel down blade in order to change the cutting angle without changing the frog? I've got a pretty nice old jointer plane for next to nothing, and when I have to joint curly stuff on the edges, I'm getting a ton of tear out. What can Devin do? And let's talk about back bevel. Can you just tell people what back beveling is in general?
Well, a back bevel, so it's Devin. Is that Devin? On Devin's jointer plane, the bevel is going to be oriented downward in the plane, closest to the wood he's working. And typically the backside of the blade opposite the bevel is flat. You lap it flat. And as it sits in that plane, as the wood hits the backside of the blade, it sees the bed of the plane, the frog or the bed angle. So in his case, it's probably 45 degrees, a real standard angle for a jointer plane. And therefore, when you work the wood, it's going to be a 45-degree cutting angle. Well, he's saying he wants to work some curly woods or some challenging figured woods where that low angle, and I'll be totally honest with you, can be a problem. I've worked with low angles and I've worked with steep angles, and like night and day, you can change the performance based on the cutting angle. So he wants to take that flat back of the blade and put a bevel on it. So you have a bevel on both sides. And thereby, say he puts a 5-degree bevel on the back, it's going to now cut with a 50-degree cutting angle, the 45 bed angle plus whatever he puts on the back of the blade. Okay. And all I can say is I've done it for 30 years. I've sharpened planes with back bevels and had outstanding results. You have a few options. You can get a plane with a steeper bed.
Okay.
Let's say it's a wooden plane. They used to specify different pitch angles, 45, 50, 55. So you can get the plane with a dedicated angle. Manufacturers today, Lee Nielsen, Veritas, offer planes with different frogs. You can get a 45, 50, 55 degree frog. In the case of Veritas, they'll custom, make whatever angle you want. So that's a way that you can alter the cutting performance. But in many ways, the simplest and possibly the cheapest way to do it is just, as Devin is asking, can you just put a bevel on the back? And the answer is yes. And it's no better or no worse than a plane that's manufactured with a cutting angle or a frog that is put in at a certain cutting angle. It performs just the same.
Huh. I didn't realize that it was just as simple as, I always thought that there would be some downside to it.
No, I've used it, like I say, and I've also worked with ones that have steeper pitch frogs and a dedicated, wooden plane with a steeper pitch. And it really just alters the cutting angle, and that's all it's doing. So
how would you go about putting a 5-degree back bevel on a blade?
Okay. Now let's make one point clear. That back bevel is minute. Okay. It's not like some big bevel. It's very small for one reason. It doesn't need to be big to be effective. It can be very small.
Okay.
Let's say a 32nd of an inch. Visually, when you look at it from the cutting edge back, it's maybe a 32nd of an inch.
Okay.
The reason for that is you still have the chip breaker that has to be on there because the plane requires the chip breaker. Certain planes require the chip breaker to adjust and whatnot.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want that chip breaker to be in above or, beyond the bevel of that back bevel. So keeping it small is key. How do you put the bevel on the back? Well, I know there's some honing guides, like I think it's the Veritas Mark II that is designed such that you can hone a pretty low angle on the back. I don't know if it'll go down to 5 degrees. I'm not that familiar with it. Okay. But I have maybe even a cheaper, simpler solution. Okay. And I actually, you can see it. And if people are watching on YouTube, they can see this. Yeah. Let's. And then we'll try to explain. We'll do our best. We'll try to explain it here. Okay. So I just have a cheap honing guide that is set on the blade to produce the primary angle. Okay, the primary bevel, and it's a $15 Eclipse style honing guide. Okay, and so it's clamped to the side of the blade, and I've set it at whatever angle that primary bevel is. Let's say 30 degrees. Okay. Well, now we need to set something to help us dial in the back bevel. And it's a carriage bolt. Okay. Hold up to the camera a little bit because I got to wrap my head around this too. You have a carriage bolt just through the slot. Through the slot. Okay. Through the slot. And the carriage bolt is a 3/8 diameter, has the round head of the carriage bolt, and it has a nut on it. And that nut actually sits to the backside of the blade, the flat side of the blade. It has sorry. It's okay. And I'm going to have you take a picture of this to send me later on. It has a washer so that there's no interference with the slot in the blade. And that nut can actually be spun upwards or downwards, and that regulates the angle. Okay. So by raising or lowering that nut, you can alter the angle of the back bevel. On the other side of the blade, you have a washer and a wing nut that locks everything in place. And so when in use, you work the one side, the primary bevel on the stone, and then you flip it over to the back, and it rests on the stone at
This is brilliant. This is the most brilliant thing I've seen in a long time.
Well, funny enough, I mean, it's been out there. I mean, I've never certainly written about it. I've shown it a little bit, but this is the method I've been using for 30 years. And, and you can do a range of bevels, from 5 up to 15 degrees or even more if you wanted to on the back. Very simple, very inexpensive, consistent too. Again, I kind of rely on a bevel gauge, like the magnetic gauge, to help me dial that 5-degree angle in.
There's another argument for the Wixie or whatever. Yeah. So maybe this could be construed as a downside that I hadn't thought of, is that when you sharpen with your honing guide at your 25 or 30 degree normal primary bevel, when you go to pull that burr off, you have to have a consistent way of getting the back to a 5-degree bevel. So that's what your carriage bolt attached through the slot does.
It's actually two honing guides, one on the one side and one on the other.
Okay. But that is an added step as opposed to having a 55-degree frog in a separate plane.
Well, not really. The only added step is you got to put that carriage bolt on the blade.
Yeah.
Because in sharpening, you do the bevel and then you remove the burr with the carriage bolt on. You're just back and forth, one side and the other side.
Yeah.
And so it's no different than sharpening. The only addition is you've got to put that little carriage bolt to hold it at the angle.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, so this is for bevel down planes.
Correct.
You have been known to put a back bevel on bevel up planes, right?
I've been known to do that. Well, the reason for that, So the reason for that is, just in the same example, you want to increase the cutting angle.
Okay.
What we're talking about here was to increase the cutting angle to reduce tear out and challenging figured wood. Well, there are a lot of situations where you actually want a real low angle. So let's say you're shooting, you're shooting end grain or you're trimming miters. Tear out is not an issue, on end grain. It maybe is on the far side if you're not backed up, but typically planing, end grain or a miter, tear out is not an issue. What is an issue is resistance. And having a low cutting angle is going to shear through that wood with less resistance than a steeper cutting angle. So let's say you have a block plane and you're doing a lot of trimming of miters, trying to adjust and dial in miters. And you deem that a 20-degree bevel angle would be nice. And let's say and what that means is your block plane is 12 degrees, plus you put the 20 degrees, you've got a low 32-degree cutting angle, which would be really nice. The downside to that is a 20-degree blade is not going to hold up very long in, say, some harsh wood, white oak or whatever. It'll just degrade very quickly because it's a real acute, kind of a weak edge.
Okay.
Well, what you can do is you can actually put a back bevel on. And so you could have the primary bevel at 20 and put, say, a 7-degree bevel on the back side. Now, instead of the bevel being 20 degrees, it's 27, the combined angle of the one on the bottom, the one on the top. And it cuts it with that low angle, but it has the durability of a steeper bevel.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow. All right. Like that snuck up on me. That's really, really interesting. So I love how you have a deep passion for hand tools and you truly respect tradition, but you're not afraid to veer off the beaten path here with hand tools. Yeah. So a back bevel on a bevel up plane, you get the angle of attack of the small bevel, of the shallower bevel, and the sturdiness of
the back bevel.
Of a back bevel. Interesting.
Yeah. The only thing I should mention there is there's limits to which you can go to. Okay. You need what is called a clearance angle. Okay. So any plane needs clearance to operate. So let's use the example of a 12-degree block plane. If you put a 12-degree back bevel on, you'd have zero clearance. The back bevel would be rubbing on the board. Let's even go.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Let's even go further than that. Let's say 13 degrees. Okay. Yeah. Now the heel of the back bevel is hitting the board and it can't cut.
Then the bevel could not actually touch the board.
Yeah, because the heel is there.
Yeah.
And you need clearance. So I've heard different numbers thrown out there. You need at least 5 degrees clearance between the bevel of the blade and the board for things to work effectively. And so in that scenario where I say put a 7-degree back bevel, that leaves 5 degrees of clearance and everything works fine. So that's the only limitation is you can't encroach the clearance needed.
Okay. So do you have an Excel spreadsheet with all of the?
No, it's funny. I'm actually not real technical. I just do stuff, but I don't overthink things in all honesty. I mean, people may not agree with that, but I understand things, I guess is what it comes down to. I understand that a low angle is desirable in working the ends of boards or miters, but I also understand that a low angle is fragile. Mm-hmm. And by strengthening that, it just makes things better. Mm-hmm. And again, in fact, anyway, I'm going to show you this.
Yeah. Bring it on.
So how the carriage bolt doesn't work for a small, low. Okay. So another inexpensive hardware store item is the, where's my camera? Right there. Okay. So that is a framing square stop or framing square gauge. Okay.
Are stair gauge or something?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Stair gauge. You can get them at Home Depot, Lowe's, a couple bucks, and they come in pairs. And what it is basically just a piece of cast brass with a knurled knob that goes into a threaded, and the threading actually goes all the way through the tool. So what you can do is, you can put like the carriage bolt, a round-headed screw on the bottom of that. And what happens now is it screws on to the, get it right here. Anyway, we'll make it quick there, but it clamps onto the back of the blade.
Okay. And then you've got the same screw stuck on.
So that's what's regulating the angle of the back is.
So there's all of these different ways of kind of working your way around.
The challenge.
And repeatably.
Yeah. So the same thing, I would use the eclipse gauge on the primary bevel and then just flip it over and use this thing to hold it at that 5-degree angle on the back. Mm-hmm. So I mean, maybe it's overkill, but it's stuff that I've used over the years and it's worked for me.
Well, I learned so much today. Chris, thank you so much
thank you
for coming on, and we're going to have you back on and we'll do a full show now that I know you have an audio recorder in your midst. And so again, thank you, Chris. You've been a contributor editor for years for Fine Woodworking and a wealth of knowledge, and probably one of the most spoken of covers in recent history was your sideboard.
Oh, that's awesome.
So many people bring up how beautiful of a piece that was.
Thank you. And that was owed in large part to John Binson, the amazing photographer, and Fine Woodworking for just the beautiful layout they do. And what a privilege to be involved with Fine Woodworking. And Ben, to you, thank you for the time and opportunity today.
Well, thank you, and thanks to your IT department, your wife, and we'll do it again real soon.
Thanks so much, Ben. Take care.
Thanks again to Chris for joining us on this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have any questions you'd like answered on the show, please send them into shoptalk@taunton.com. We're kind of running low on questions, believe it or not. We're just not getting them in as much as we used to. So keep in mind, the discussion is dictated by the questions that are sent in. So if you want us to talk about something, bring it on. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks a bunch for listening.
If you love this podcast, you'll love Fine Woodworking Unlimited. Access more than 40 years of articles, how-to videos, and project plans designed to take your craft to the next level. Check it out.